On the 7th of August 1992, 65-year-old Margaret Doe Roberts disappeared from a 150-acre farm near Eads in Tennessee. She was last seen at 9:30 a.m. when her husband Alan, who left home after allegedly receiving a phone call regarding a property he was selling. When he returned later in the afternoon, she was gone. That night, he received a ransom call, a muffled male voice demanding $100,000. He threatened to kill her if the demands were not met. Alan made a personal plea to the kidnapper, saying that he was willing to do anything necessary to save his wife. Additional phone calls followed, and each time the supposed kidnapper claimed to be holding Doe hostage and demanded various amounts of money. The abductor was believed to be a white male in his 40s or 50s who used a fake exaggerated Asian accent in the phone messages. The case was featured as part of a special alert in the September 23, 1992 episode. An update regarding the ransom calls was also aired on the 17th of September 1993. After the broadcast, several of Martha's family and friends, along with her husband Alan, received phone calls from the kidnapper demanding $185,000 for her safe return. The caller claimed that Alan had hired the caller to kidnap his wife and that he had not paid them. Alan, however, claimed that this was not true. In August of 1993, investigators identified a prime suspect in the case, 59-year-old Charles Jackson Lord Jr., a neighbour and a former business associate of Alan. It was determined that he most likely made the ransom calls. It was discovered that he was heavily in debt and that he embezzled money previously from a church and from the government. Desperate for money, Lord had spent about 4 months planning the abduction. Lord later confessed that on the morning of the kidnapping, he called Alan and pretended that he was interested in purchasing a property that he was selling. He did this in order to get Alan out of their house. He then tricked Doe into getting into his car by telling her that Alan had been in an accident. Once he got her back to his house, he tied her up in an apartment above his garage and drugged her with sleeping pills, and then he raped her. After phoning Alan to demand a ransom, he returned to rape her again. He then put a pillow over her face until she stopped breathing. It is believed that this all occurred within hours of kidnapping. Earlier that day, Charles had constructed a pit behind his compost pile for burial purposes. Lord's wife was apparently home on the day, yet she was completely unaware of her husband's sordid activities. She was found buried around the compost yard, with the body preserved by a layer of cement and lime. Lord was convicted of the kidnapping and murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. Teresita Basa was born in the Philippines in 1929 and had moved to the United States in the 1960s to study music. She later became a respiratory therapist at Edgewater Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. Quiet and unassuming, she was the last person one would expect to be a victim of a violent crime. However, at 9 p.m. on the night of the 21st of February 1977, the fire department was called to put out a fire in her home. In the blaze, they found the nude body under a burning mattress with a butcher's knife buried in her chest. Investigators believe that the fire had been set to cover up the murder. There was also evidence that she was a victim of a sexual crime. The autopsy, however, determined that she had not been raped. There appeared to be no motive for the crime. Investigators could find little evidence, as most had been destroyed by the fire. One piece of evidence that was found, however, was a memo that stated, "Get theatre tickets for AS." The police pursued several leads, but they were all subsequently dismissed. They all suspected that AS may have been involved in the crime, but they did not know what these initials stood for. Her boyfriend, whom she allegedly argued with, was considered a possible suspect. More than 5 months after the murder, Teresita's co-worker Remy Chua, another native from the Philippines, and her husband Joe, contacted Detective Joe Strachula, claiming to have information about the murder. Remy told Joe that shortly after the murder, she began having visions and dreams in which Teresita appeared to her, begging her to go to the police and tell them what had happened to her. One night, Remy took a nap at home. According to Joe, she began speaking in another voice. The voice said that she was Teresita Basa. She told Joe that her killer's name was Alan Showery. The voice claimed that Showery was an orderly that worked at the hospital. She urged Joe to go to the police. However, when Remy woke up, she claimed to have no memory of what happened. At first, Joe decided not to go to the police. Then the voice possessed Remy a second time, asking Joe why he had not gone to the police. He said that he had no evidence against Showery. The voice then told Joe that Showery had taken Teresita's jewellery after the murder and given it to his girlfriend. Detective Strachula didn't know whether he could trust this information or not. He decided to do a background check on Alan Showery. He found that Sherry lived close to Turicida. Co-workers confirmed that Sherry was planning to go to Turicida's apartment that night to repair a television. Strachula brought Sherry in for questioning. He confirmed that he went to her apartment to repair the TV. He claimed that he didn't have the tools to fix it, so he went back home. Strachula didn't believe him, so he contacted Sherry's girlfriend. He asked if Sherry had given her any jewellery recently, and she said that he had. She agreed to let Turicida's friends and family inspect the jewellery. They confirmed that some of the jewellery had belonged to Turicida. Confronted with this evidence, he confessed to this murder. He said that after he left her apartment, he made a plan to return and rob her. When he returned, he said that she let him back in. When she turned around to lock the door, he grabbed her from behind and attacked her. He disrobed her to make it look like a sexual crime. He then took her bedroom mattress, placed it over her body, and set it on fire. Despite his confession, he pleaded not guilty to Turicida's murder. When a mistrial occurred, he decided to plead guilty on the 23rd of February 1979, receiving only a 14-year sentence for his cold-blooded crime. He was released on parole in 1983. 18-year-old Bonnie Craig was a vivacious and well-liked college freshman at the University of Alaska in Anchorage. Before dawn, on the morning of the 28th of September 1994, she left her home for school. 2 days a week, she walked 45 minutes through the early morning darkness to catch the bus. She was a diligent student who prided herself on arriving promptly for a 7 a.m. English class. However, she never arrived that day. Her body was found floating in McHugh Creek later that day. The medical examiner determined she had drowned, but she had also suffered severe head injuries, possibly resulting from a fall off a cliff. At first, Alaska State Troopers believed Bonnie had died in a hiking accident. Her mother Karen, however, found evidence she might have been murdered. When she viewed Bonnie's body, she noticed defense wounds on her hands. She didn't believe that Bonnie would go to the creek area during a school day. Also, the creek was 10 miles from the bus stop, and she had no way of getting there. Furthermore, the belongings she took to school that day were not found with her body. According to Karen, the police kept most of the information about the case to themselves. Karen found an ally and reporter, Maria Downey, who was also trying to get more information about the case. For unknown reasons, police did not release the results of the sexual assault examination. Karen was told that Bonnie had not been raped. She learned about the results 6 months later. Bonnie had most likely been sexually assaulted, as semen was found during the examination. However, police did not rule out the possibility it came from a consensual sexual act. Frustrated with the police working on the case, Karen began her own investigation. She suspected that Bonnie's murder might have something to do with her undercover work with the local police. An informant told her that the family had been targeted by a drug lord after a sting she had been involved in resulted in the arrest of several members of his organisation. He also claimed that Bonnie's murder was a message to the police department to back off. According to Karen, Bonnie was murdered the day after she identified people who were released from prison. Despite the precautions taken to protect her during the busts, it wouldn't have been difficult for the accused to learn who had fingered them. Karen was again frustrated when she met with one of the lead investigators. She told them about the information she received. He repeatedly asked her for the identity of her source. She promised the informant that she wouldn't reveal his identity. As a result, she believes the investigators didn't follow up on her lead. However, the investigators claim they've looked into the lead she gave them. They claim that they merely have not shared all of the information about the case. A year later, one of Bonnie's professors contacted Karen. She became suspicious of one of her students, suspecting that he may have been involved in Bonnie's murder. According to the professor, he made several references to the day of the murder in his journal, claiming it will be a very tough day and that he will be put to a test. According to Karen, some of his writings were also violent. The professor claimed that the student was late for school that day. When he came to her class, she noticed that he was all wet, like he just got out of a shower. She also said it smelt like he poured a whole bottle of cologne on himself. After Bonnie's murder, his writings were more peaceful. DNA evidence and an alibi, however, ruled him out of her case. Karen believed that there was another person involved. The DNA didn't have to belong to the student. She also uncovered he had an assault charge against him and he had been bailed out by a friend who was involved in another murder. Troopers tried to find witnesses who may have seen something on the last morning Bonnie was alive. A neighbour reported seeing her around 5:20 a.m. walking down their street. Another witness saw her at a bus stop around 6:20 a.m. Another neighbour saw a car idling in front of her home that morning. Finally, an anonymous caller to the police Crime Stoppers line claimed to have seen her at the bus stop talking to two men in a vehicle. Up to this point, there wasn't enough evidence and the cold case remained unsolved. In 2006, DNA from the semen found on Boddie's body was matched with Kenneth Dion through the CODIS National DNA database. He was in prison in New Hampshire for a series of armed robberies when the match was made. At the time of the murder, he lived in the area, was on probation for robbery, and had been released from an Alaskan prison just a few months earlier. In 2007, Dion was charged with raping and murdering Bonnie. It is believed that the crime was a random act of violence. At trial, he claimed that he had consensual sex with her. He said that she accidentally fell to her death while alone at the creek. However, when first questioned, he claimed that he didn't know her family and friends didn't know him either. He also couldn't account for his whereabouts on the day she vanished, and his wife said he wasn't at home for the entire week. Furthermore, the medical examiner determined that her injuries were caused by a blunt object or a weapon, not from a fall. At the time, he carried a martial arts weapon in his car, which could have inflicted the injuries. Also, a leaf with her blood on it was found above a cliff area, suggesting that she was already injured before falling from the cliff. Finally, her family noted that she was in a strict committed relationship with her boyfriend at the time and wouldn't have had sex with someone else, especially a complete stranger. Dion was found guilty of a murder on the 15th of June 2011. He was sentenced to 124 years in prison on the 31st of October that same year.